Hi, so we've got James Marinos from the mighty Wolves of Avalon with us. Great to have you on the show, James. Um, Before we go into the album, just tell us what's going on in your life right now besides promoting the album for the Wolves of Avalon.
Um, work, normal working things, and just general life things. I don't suppose that it's much of a secret to anyone that we're not far off that busy time of year as we approach what some call Christmas and Yule and all the rest of it, whatever you call it. So yeah, there's always sort of planning around seeing family and friends and everything else. So it's all good. Um, yeah. How about you?
Me, yeah, same as you, just busy with work. So like you, I work full time during the day, and then I'm not an artist. I'm a writer, and I'm in my free time reviewing music rather than creating it. So I'm always envious of you for that. What one thing that is
No.
impressive this year? one, I'm just downplaying it as well, like you are. It's like let's move on from these. This is not rock and roll. What's going on in your life? Who gives a shit? Let's talk about art.
Yeah, come on, let's have a beer, man.
That's not a good start to the interview. Apologies there to our viewers. No, what I was going to say, James, is the amount of networking you've done and guest collaborations in the Wolves of Avalon on this album. Can you just tell us what is the process if you want to get Tony Demolition Man Dolan from Venom and Venom Inc. involved, or Thurios from Drud? Can you just tell us how these collaborations materialized?
Yes. So, to be honest, I personally have quite little to do with the actual connecting with the guests myself. That's done by a label or distributor, Godria Records, uh, who we've been with since the start, for that matter. So back in the day, in the sort of early and mid '90s, the guy behind Godria Records, Kryn, was like making this magazine, like a print zine, believe it or not, before the days of the internet. And yeah, from that time, he made quite a lot of connections and reviews of various bands, of which some were up and coming at the time. Now, like way more established than we are or probably will ever be. But there's some contacts and connections he's had and kept from that time. And when it comes round to the time of the Wolves project, getting underway, there's always conversations about, who'd be great on what track. And really, it kind of goes from there. Sometimes I get included in on an email thread and get chatting with some of them. And you mentioned Tony Dylan, who's an absolute legend, I have to say. He's very personable guy and very active on social media, because his band Venom Inc. Has just also released a new album a couple of months ago. So they're very busy online at the moment and, very responsive. Where there's, for example, Host from Talk also appears on this record, but he's much less communicative on email and things. So, getting any kind of level of communication between him and myself is quite nominal, really. But
Yeah, expect that from him, though, wouldn't you? Given his reputation and the enigma that surrounds him, I would be
yeah,
very surprised if he said yes. I was involved in the background, and he came round for a cup of tea in Hoddesdon,
um,
Hertfordshire,
yeah,
and we were watching football. Wouldn't really expect that.
it would be a surprise. He'd be most welcome, as would you, by the way.
I'll hold you to that. Can I just explain to our viewers as well? When your other band, Ritual, who I'm a bit of a fanboy, aren't I, of the Ritual project, and Scream Blast
Yeah,
Republic, just you've just landed the #1 spot in the top 7 EPs of 2022. When we met up in January, I came to interview you, the band. That is still the best drinking session I've had this year. The weather was atrocious. We're in Letchworth Garden City, and we were smashed within 2 hours, all of us, weren't we?
That was a brilliant night. Unfortunately, off the back of it, our singer got home, and then the next morning he was like, "Oh no, I have COVID," and I thought, "We'll all get it now." We didn't. I think it was because we were drinking so much that the alcohol got rid of it.
I look back fondly. What I remember from that actually is just that the weather was atrocious. We met on a Sunday afternoon. What was it, 1 o'clock? We were still drinking 4 hours later, which isn't, don't get me wrong, that's not a Titanic session, but the amount of goodwill and merriment and enthusiasm. We were just talking music inevitably for 4 hours, weren't we?
It was brilliant. It was actually, I think, the first time that we met, and it was just like, well, we all enjoy our music. We all like a beer. What's not to enjoy about today? Great day, man. Very good. Exactly.
Another guest then, we've mentioned it already, haven't we? Thurios from Drudk. So I just reviewed their album, which I really enjoyed. Obviously, he's the vocalist, isn't he? So given the situation in Ukraine, do we even know, is he still in Kharkiv, or is he a refugee? What were the communications like there? Because that can't be easy.
Well, I last had emails with him earlier this year, and it was literally the day after the invasion started. And at that point, I think everyone was being sent into, well, he says, he had to go into the subways, just purely because at that point, I don't think anyone in Ukraine was even prepared or considering the fact that anything would even happen. I think the consensus is like, no, there is not going to be an invasion. No, this is not going to happen. This is all, politics playing out before our eyes with, the threat of an invasion. But no, it then did happen. And since he is fighting on the front line. I believe, I don't know, and also I don't know how, wise it would be to discuss certain things about that anyway. But he is.
You don't want to give anything away, do you? In terms of
no, it's a very sensitive situation. But I haven't had really very much correspondence since then. But our singer has. He spoke with him about 3 weeks ago, and he seems to be doing well. So. Yeah, I'm obviously relieved. When I did speak with him, his spirits seemed extremely high considering what was going on, and very resistant to any kind of, they're just like losing is not even an option considered or entertained. It's like, no, we're going to win, and I think they will, and everyone. I think in their right minds seems to be very much on that side. And Time Magazine's Man of the Year today is Zelensky, isn't it? Or at least a bit of the reveal. So that doesn't come as a surprise. And I think actually if you go to Drudka's Facebook page, there's quite frequently donations open to helping support the resistance. It's a shocking situation, that's for sure. It's
remarkable that he's still writing music. He's appeared on your album. Drudka put out that album that came out this month, which I really enjoyed. It was released by A Season of Mist. Tony Dolan, you mentioned. I loved that Venom Inc. record. That got an 8 out of 10.
It's a great album, isn't it? I'm a big fan of it, and it's cracking. For sure. Good
band, and underrated as well. And obviously people just assume, you've got the schism between Venom and Venom Inc. and you got litigants on either side. It's actually Venom Inc. got back together to celebrate that 1990 album, didn't they? Where Tony Dolan comes in and they released this great album. So that they wanted to do that to to really give something to the fans, didn't they, to commemorate it. So it's not as hostile as people think between the two.
Yeah. And fair play to them. You know, the band obviously has had some degree of evolution, but you know what they're doing is, well, obviously very much within the genre that it is, and bears testament to. You know, it still feels fresh listening to the new record now. They're just great songs, ultimately, I think, which is always, you know, that's what kind of carries a record, isn't it? That, and obviously, yeah, some of the mystique and everything around certain musicians and genres, but like, if the songs aren't there, then there's no record.
It leads me on to the next point, and I briefly discussed this with you, didn't I, when you sent me the album, and I love some of the songs on this album. I said to you though, it feels like I'm listening to CD 1 of an epic double album, and there's no CD 2. So the question is, 6 years since your last album, 5 tracks, 28 minutes. Why is it not a longer album?
Yeah, there's a few different elements at play with that one. Originally, when the songs started to be written, or I started demoing them here, there wasn't really like a construct or a requirement in my mind, at least. Anyway, it was just I knew what the subject matter would be. Metatron, the singer, had told me that was what we were going to do the album about. But yeah, it was quite open at that point. And I wrote, and I had, I think it's like 9 tracks together. So there are actually other songs on this album or EP. I don't know necessarily. We've released it as, let me put it this way, we've released it as an album because it is over 25 minutes. I know it's like the whole 6-song over 30-minute rule. Some people say it's 25 minutes. Slayer's Rain in Blood, it's a little shorter than our album, but that's an album. I don't know, but nonetheless, the juice of the matter is that it's 29 minutes long. It's 5 tracks, but when it was starting to be written, there was more songs, and then I was told, right, we're going to release this as a vinyl. So I said, okay, great, let's do that. I think that's a really cool collector's format. And it seems to be the way things are going in terms of like physical formats and interest from people who are, you know, quite rightly willing to part with their hard-earned money and take a risk on a pretty unknown band by all accounts. So we thought vinyl, and we decided it was going to be like 33 RPM, and I was told that houses like 15 minutes per side. So I proceeded with working to that. But then when I submitted the work, it was too long because it was only within a certain couple of tracks. Or we ditched a couple of tracks, I should say. So there is actually more stuff, but it's some of the other songs aren't quite sort of release ready. But ultimately, we cherry picked our favourite works for this release, and all being well, it won't take another 6 years to release something else. But I'm glad you liked what you did here. But obviously, yeah, in terms of albums, yes, it's slightly shorter. On a completely other tangent, you know, irrespective of the songs and everything else, the delay for getting the record done has come down to other like factors that are kind of some in my control, some out of my control. You know, the unavoidable topic of COVID does come up because I lost access here during that time. I also relocated or relocated to Berkhamsted, which is where I now live, with my girlfriend, and also, yeah, just general life, personal issues on both my singer and my part, and then of course comes the vinyl format again. This album was ready a year ago; it was done. But then there was the issue with the volume of content for it and the pressing time. Because at that point last year, okay, we didn't have the whole Ukraine situation that's obviously caused considerable amount of issues for, production to some degree, mostly outside of manufacturing vinyl, but nonetheless. But obviously off the back of COVID and a lot of production delays, it's like taking a whole year to get it pressed. So yeah,
that's the backlog now, isn't it, in the industry? Any production plan that says, "Oh, pay, with this we're ready in 6 months," they're lying. It's 12 months, isn't it, for every artist at the moment?
There and thereabouts.
The backlog is huge.
Not to mention, obviously, touring artists, of which we are not, obviously had that period of time when no, they're not gigging. No, we're not working. No, we're not earning bread and butter money. So, it allowed people to sort of take, I suppose, like some time to perhaps just actually write and be creative. So, right on. Yeah. Not only is there suddenly this backlog in production in plants, but then on top of that, you've got a surplus of records being, written and ready to be released as well. And like I said, we aren't like any pressing plant's number one priority. We're not. We got like about 500 of these things pressed. So, I'm sure they've got other clients that are like, yeah, we want like 10,000 pressings done or whatever. So yeah, we didn't take precedence, I don't think, but it's done. I'm happy with it. I'm going to painstakingly plug it here. There it is. Yeah. So that's the actual vinyl. But yeah, it's done now.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the album then. I'll give you some observations. I love to me, you describe it as epic pagan metal. That is a good description of it. There is a blackened element to it because of your guest, but obviously because of the lead singer, Metatron, who is a cult figure in the black metal underground, isn't he, in the UK because of his band, the Meads of Asphodel, who have released, I would say, at least 2 albums from their discography are undisputed classics of British black metal, and have received the acclaim accordingly in Terrorizer magazine and various other publications. So I know that he's always going to bring that extreme element to it. But do you know 2 things that surprised me? I even asked you who did the vocals on the chorus to Men of Gododin, and it turns out it was you, and it's Mike Patton standard. Where did that come from?
Oh, I really appreciate that.
It sounds like Mike Patton on Angel Dust. I was like, what the hell is this? This has just come from nowhere.
Amazing. No, I really appreciate that, mate. Thank you. I've always done mostly clean vocals on the Wolves records up until now, but I would say on this album I've probably done more vocals than on any of the others, and yeah, it just felt right that there was some more clean vocals in certain places. I really appreciate you like them. The first thing that you said about, obviously, Metatron from the Meads being, our front man, our singer. He has been since the start. Essentially, he and I, since we started this project, he kind of comes up with the lyric. Well, he writes the lyrics. He's the main vocalist. I write the songs and record them. And then occasionally throw in some some other vocals and other instruments as well as we go along to try and build a picture of, frankly, I don't know, whatever it is that we do. I think, yeah, I agree. It is a pagan metal sound, and if I'm honest, that was the original idea behind the band. And I think the first album, in particular, is the most sort of true to form in terms of like sound and approach of the genre you can get. And it was raw, man. Like I literally recorded everything in this room, like the drums, everything. So it was really raw. But on the subsequent albums, I managed to get access to some studios to record the drums, because to be honest, that's the biggest problem in terms of the recording. My side is getting a good drum sound, and I think that's improved actually in terms of like the actual albums as well. The production on this most recent one, I think, for me personally, is perhaps the most polished and where I like the direction of the sounds. But you know, I like also what we've done before. I mean, we wrote it, so it would be a shame if I didn't. But there's things that I look back on all of our records and go, that could be better, or that could be different now. But it was kind of a bit of a learning curve for me as well, really, because I'd never, while I've played in bands for a very long time now, I'd never conducted a studio project like this, like you mentioned, with coordinating guests overseas and people who I don't necessarily know, and communicating as a non-violinist, for example, what I would like to hear from a violin on X, Y, or Z bit, part of the song. So, yeah, when we first started this project, it was 2009, and I wasn't necessarily as familiar with like internet correspondence at that point anyway. You know, I'd had the internet a few years, no doubt, but all I had at that point was a laptop and a hard disk recorder, and that's how the whole thing was done between that. So it was like quite, to sort of quote Fenris, it was quite primitive, man. So it was like quite raw, but since then, obviously, doing one album after the other, you kind of get into a rhythm of, okay, I know how this will work now and what needs to be done. And obviously we've worked with a few musicians now in a sort of a folk context, so I understand more about what it is they need from me in order to do what they do. And yeah, pagan metal, there it is. That's the end result. But I wouldn't necessarily say that I personally, as a songwriter, go like intentionally out of my way to say, right, what is going to write songs based on more of the concept or an idea behind the album, like you might approach, or a composer may approach, writing a soundtrack, for example. So I sort of take it a little bit like that, and yeah, hopefully people enjoy it. That's the idea. But yeah.
The thing is, Metatron does give you great responsibility, doesn't it? Because the lyrics are excellent. I really enjoy going through them. So he's obviously taken E. Gododin. How do you actually pronounce that first letter? Because it's obviously Middle Welsh.
Yeah.
Would you pronounce that I?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's E. Gododin.
E. Gododin. Yeah.
Yeah, the two D's become a the sound, I
Oh,
believe.
right, okay.
But I'm not like a Welsh language expert. So
The Brythonic Celtic languages.
No, exactly. And I think, you know, in sort of contemporary British or English, being very careful about that. In English, yes, it would be Why God Adin. But yes, the story itself was lifted from a book called the Book of Aneurin, which I believe was written around the late 13th century. So it was originally written in Welsh. And obviously there's transcriptions of that, which is loosely what Metatron used to create the story of the album, because it is based around this one narrative. But he has been quite clear with me. You know, he is a history expert. There's no doubt about it. The guy knows it almost, you know, encyclopedically. But me, I don't, and it's not my area. I have an interest in ancient history, in particular in sort of Iron and Bronze Age history. But around this period, you know, he is definitely an expert, and yeah, he's used that as essentially his inspiration for the lyrics. But he hasn't transcribed things, and literally he hasn't poached like sentences or anything from that text. It's kind of his own vision of it.
Yeah, that's what impressed me. So for our viewers, I suppose I should just give a quick summary. So this is a concept album about the last stand, isn't it, of the men of God Odin, who were part of an Old North Celtic kingdom that was overrun by the invading Germanic settlers, the Angles, who set up the kingdom of Bernicia. And this is a battle that's believed to have taken place in 600 AD in modern-day Catterick, isn't it? Now, what I really loved about this, he captures the darker side of war. This isn't just glory and the martial spirit of chivalry. He's talking about the fear that comes in battle as well. And I always think back to some of the written sources or testimonies that have survived from the Battle of Hastings, 1066. When both sides are lined up, there are descriptions of infantrymen on both sides vomiting and excreting because they know they're going to suffer a violent death. You never see that in any Hollywood depiction of a battle, do you? And he brings that to life, certainly in Men of God Odin. But one song I think that you've really excelled on, because your duty is to make sure that his lyrics can be lucid in the mix, and you're playing metal. So I really like how that song, Is This How It's Meant to Be, really captures that pathos, doesn't it? But am I right in thinking, were you listening to Simon and Garfunkel? Were you listening to Simon and Garfunkel for the inspiration for your harmonies? Because they're so clear.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I do like Simon and Garfunkel, but I wouldn't say that was especially an inspiration. In fact, there was quite a few things about that one track on the album. It was the longest song. It's not only the longest song on there, it actually took the longest to write. It was kind of written piecemeal throughout the entire writing process of all the other songs. So yeah, there was a lot of different moments in there, and I did very much want and intend for the song itself to go from one sort of extreme, or one sort of sense, one style into another, and sort of did draw on quite a lot of progressive rock influences for that at least not consciously but subconsciously. I didn't necessarily have like one song that I was like, I want to write a song like that. It was more, let's tell this story in that way. And it kind of starts as almost a sort of a medieval kind of ballad or something, and then it goes into this section, which actually I will tell you is inspired by it's the motif from a piece of classical music called Peter and the Wolf, and I thought it was like, is it Sergei Prokofiev who wrote that?
I think so.
And
I can't be sure myself.
No, it's a piece of music that's got a very playful nature about it. But it's obviously about a boy and a wolf, and that kind of metamorphosis from something quite playful into something a bit more sinister. And I thought, well, that could be an interesting segue into the heavier part of the song, which then comes in before reverting back to sort of some of the earlier sections, and then just ends in like some like really pompous, like
Yeah.
Viking horn drinking kind of.
Triumphant. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Triumphant. Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Imperious would be another word. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm glad you like the song. For me, it's certainly like one of my favourites. Although I wouldn't necessarily say it's like one of the more sort of concise tracks. So I don't necessarily expect it would be anyone's favourite track the first time you listen, but maybe each time you did listen to the record, you might find something else in that song that was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, or I liked that, or you know, or maybe completely the opposite. Like, I am never listening to that song ever again.
What was your favourite track on this album?
um, I like I like I like the songs. I like them together as well, which is also why I like that it's on a vinyl, so there's no sort of skip. You know, you commit to listening. In terms of like the delivery in a sort of a concise way, I like The Shining Company. I like how heavy the track "Men of Gododin" is. That's kind of that's more traditionally what you'd expect from like a sort of more extreme metal band, I suppose. But then I take, you know, quite a lot of delight in side B, which is maybe slightly less tempo driven and more atmospheric, perhaps. I I like a lot of music in this genre and black metal that is less on the satanic side of things, and I'd say much more on the kind of atmospheric and pagan or ethereal side of the genre. I find it much more engaging. Maybe when I was 19, I was like, no, it's going to be fast. If there's no blast beats, it's shit. But no, for me personally, I really appreciate a lot more of that, the slightly ambient approach of some of the bands I like in the style. Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
so I think we've got to wrap
yeah.
it up in a few minutes. Well, let's first of all,
Yeah.
let's just tell the viewers then. So this album was released on the 25th of November on Godway Records. It's a vinyl and a digital release. How as a final message, how do you want this album to be perceived? If people are to understand it, ideally, how would you want them to react to it?
Um, it's not really. I know this might sound conceited, but it's not. I never would want anyone to perceive it in any other way other than, do you like the songs? They are a testament to ancient British folklore and stories. And I think in terms of the message, I'd want people to enjoy that and experience perhaps a story that they'd never heard before. And from a musical side of things, it's, you know, it does it. I just hope people feel captivated or interested in it.
I
And
certainly,
perhaps,
yeah,
if
the
not
storytelling aspect
understand,
is phenomenal.
well, no, I appreciate that. I think if at least I'm not necessarily, again, I don't want to sound conceited or anything, but like above like understanding it as an album within a genre, I'd most like people to hear it on its own merit as just a piece of music and say, I liked it. I think you're right. I've seen a couple of reviews that were sort of perhaps less in favour of it, which is fine. You know, you're never going to please everyone's tastes. But I think where possibly some people have been a bit more critical of it is that it doesn't necessarily slip very comfortably into sort of traditional expectations of a genre, of the genre of pagan metal or extreme metal. But I'll be frank, that wasn't necessarily the intention.
I think that's the strength.
I hope you enjoy it.
I think that's the strength. We'll be Scream Blast Repeat. We'll be publishing our review next week. I've already written it, and I did say describing the music of the Wolves of Avalon is almost as difficult as translating Middle Welsh into the modern English language. So that I always use like that, that pulls from so many directions. It's certainly got almost like a traditional galloping heavy metal core to it, but there's so much going on in these songs. And just before I end it, that's why I was almost just thinking, give me more at the end of it. But now I understand why. You knew you were writing for a vinyl record, which was going to be half 30 minutes. And there were 9 songs. So I do understand the reasons for that. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on here. I do hope that our viewers and listeners will give the Wolves of Avalon a listen, especially your back catalogue. Some of you will already know the Meads of Asphodel. And also Ritual, the Enigma EP that you released with your other band this year. Definitely go and check that out. So thanks very much, James. I will see you again.